Cool. Very cool.
Today's Love My Tool TV is welcoming Chris Bihary. Of course, there's Denny, the main host, and me. I'm just a comic that hangs around. And today we're going to be talking about taps, Chris, right?
Absolutely. How you doing, Tim? How you doing, Denny?
Hi, Chris.
Every day alive is wonderful for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what is there about taps that we haven't talked about already?
Well, I think one of the things I like to talk about, and here I'm going to put my blind eye on here. All right, for today. And
that's how you feel when you don't have a tap on your network, right?
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, the eye covered, and one of the things that I wanted to do today, and Tim and I talk about this, and I know Denny, you've been part of this. We started doing some work together back in 2005. And one of the major things that Tim and I say, and you mentioned it one time, Denny, you said, why are you and Tim still talking about taps and spam ports? And it's something that you almost think should be a no-brainer. Why do people want to be blind on the network? And I'm glad we found the special effect 2 minutes ago before we started, so we can really throw it in. But the reality is, customers out there are still not aware of what's happening with network taps access and true visibility to the network. I was just recently at several shows. I was in Singapore at the Communication Asia show. I was at Cisco Live last week. So been a road warrior, so sorry guys, I haven't been on in a while, and hopefully I go in stints, so I'll be on for a month or two, and then you don't see me for 2 months or 3 months. So one of the things that is still a fact in the industry, and I know this firsthand from talking to people, is when you ask them, are you using spam ports? How are you getting access to data? And how are you, feeding your security tools and your analyzers and getting the data off the network, which is a basic question. People today are still saying we're using spam, and I would say almost 50% of the people that I spoke to at these trade shows, and obviously on the opposite ends, right? I'm in San Diego, I'm in Singapore, so we got a good geographic spread there, and I would say that 50% of the people I spoke to had no idea what a tap was or how it worked. And one of the things I would do is get on the whiteboard and draw the most basic function of what a tap is. And this would get into breaking the wire. So you have two network elements, right? You got your router and a switch, and I want to place an IDS in between them as an example. So you're going to break the link, physically break it, and now you're going to put a purpose-built hardware in between them. And this hardware is going to, now you go from your router to the tap and the tap to the switch, and now you have a complete connection. The tap sends the traffic back and forth between the two network devices. When you plug the tap in initially, there's no power. So it's a passive device at this point, right? Obviously, we're preaching the choir here with you, Denny and Tim, but the bottom line is now you have the connection. Now you power up the tap. Now you're going to get a complete copy of the traffic. So when you have two network elements, it's a conversation. And the router talks to the switch talks to the router, and in a full duplex environment, if it's 1 gig, you have a potential of having 2 gigs of traffic. If you're 10 gig, you can have 20 gig. If you're 100 gig, you have 200 gig capability, depending on the utilization. And it's so basic, but what we're doing is we're providing the bump in the wire. It's a physical device, and we're copying. And our tagline here at Garland is "See every bit byte packet." And at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. So we take off the patch for a while, and now I get my lens on here,
Wow.
and I get to see. It's fancy, right? Now I
And
can
we ought
see
to,
everything,
charge
Denny.
you extra for the Google effects.
Exactly. So now I can see everything. You know what? I put this network tap in place, and now I'm seeing everything that's flowing on the network. And this is still a very educational market. Now, we get people calling us up and saying they know exactly what they want. They need a copper tap, 40 gig tap, 100 gig tap, fiber. So you do have your companies and engineers that understand um, what a tap does. But I believe at least 50% of security engineers and network engineers in the market really don't even know what a tap is. They've never used it. And someone asked me the other day, they were wondering, one of my distributors wondering, hey, you're at the Cisco show. If you're getting certified with Cisco, is there any education about taps in their certification process? And that's something I'm just going to go look into and see if there is, because I actually had about 5 students, Cisco students that were at Cisco Live. They stopped by our booth, and they were actually part of the group who built the network at Cisco Live. So it's kind of neat. They actually bring in students, and the students actually build the network at Cisco Live. I don't know, Tim or Denny, if you're aware of that, but I thought that was very cool. And so I asked the 5 students, has anybody here heard of a network tap? And the answer was no, they haven't. Then I said, well, have you heard of a spam port? They're like, well, yes, of course, we've heard of spam port. And so, I think when we look at it, the educational side of it, students aren't being educated that there's a standard that really should be met when you're collecting the data off the network, especially if you're using a security device. So if we were to truly focus on a day in the life of a security engineer, and my job is to deploy the intrusion detection system on the network, and I have a choice, am I going to connect this up via spam port or tap? I think there's no choice. If my boss comes to me and says, Chris, what happened? We didn't capture this breach. Why didn't we capture it? And you go back and say, oh, the spam port was busy and it dropped packets, or you know what, the network engineer needed to troubleshoot something on the network, so there's only one spam port. They decided to switch it over and connect it up to their analyzer and take the IDS offline, and then in operations they forgot to put it back online. These are all real world things that happen. Is, oh, I didn't even know the spam port was changed. So now it's not collecting all the data it should be collecting. So at the end of the day, I mean, I'll throw it out to you, Tim. Being the guru in the industry,
right.
And IT manager comes to you, CTO says, Tim, we got breached and we didn't collect the data. Why didn't we collect the data? And then you tell your boss, oh, by the way, you could have bought a $2,000 tap that you can insert into your network that is a dedicated piece of hardware. It never gets removed, and it guarantees everything that's flowing between your network devices gets copied to your intrusion detection system. And when you tell your CTO, it's a $1,000 device or $2,000 device or a $5,000 device, as far as I'm concerned, you're walking out the door. You're fired for such a simple, basic part of the network. So I guess that's what I'm amazed about right now, is the lack of knowledge about network taps. Because most people that do understand them, they're basic, they do their job, and the thing is, it just should be part of your design. I mean, why would you not invest in your security solution? You have a budget of $50,000. Your networking tap piece is going to be under 10% of your overall cost.
Right.
So it really should not even be a discussion point. So when you ask us, Denny, why are you guys still talking about it? It's because people still don't know. And we need to do more education. We need to, I think, specifically focus on the security engineers in the industry. And I know this is obviously a show for Wireshark, and it's just as important with network monitoring, but it's even more critical when you're dealing with the security side. And so yeah, it amazes me on the lack of awareness.
You know how I compare it, Chris? When you jump in the water and you look at the bottom, you can't really see, right? But then if you put your goggles on, you can dive down and see everything. And above the water, all you can see is just the surface of the water and a little bit of the bottom. But with a tap, you get into it. And I preach this. And by the way, you're absolutely correct. It's just not taught about taps. When I speak at Kennesaw State, or when I talk to Poly or any of the universities I go to, I always talk about taps because they're essential. And if you're in security, if you look at your network, everything in your network can be hacked, breached, have malware stuck in it, but your tap can't. Your tap always gives you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that's essential in security. You can't wonder if you're seeing everything. And I tell people all the time, at least start out with 2 taps. One where outside of your safety perimeter, and one inside. The one outside can show you what kinds of attacks are going on, how people are probing and testing your network for weaknesses. And then, of course, on the inside of your perimeter, you hope that you don't see any of that, because if you see some of that, they've breached your security perimeter, and they're in your network. And these are simple things. Even simple things like just doing a baseline study on your network. Who's attaching to what? Where's this information coming from? Is it inside, outside of my safety perimeter? Just some of the fundamental things we forget about. But I agree with you. And I just recently talked to a friend of mine here. He's a young guy, took over as CISO for a company. And the first thing he said is, because of you, we got to have taps. We got to figure out where to put them, and we got to start putting them in so I can see my network. And if you're a Wireshark fan, which there's millions and millions of them, if you want to see what's going on in your network, the only way you're going to do it is with a tap. Span doesn't do it. Span grooms data. VACLs do the same thing. You can go ahead and use the embedded protocol capture in a router, but again, it's distorted view. It's a best effort view. A tap gives you 100% of its time, 100% of the time.
Right. I was thinking, Tim. I was thinking about, and I want to just continue with the comment that Chris made, which is about educating a customer. But I want to kind of add to that. You just remind me. Remember the story about how the guy got on his first day on his job, and opens the desk, opens the drawer, and there's 3 envelopes. And he opens the first envelope, and it was actually left by his predecessor. And the first envelope says, "Blame me," right? Blame the old guy. Blame the last guy. You mentioned someone who just started as a CISO for the first day. I would say tap is your first envelope. And if you don't have taps in the network, the first thing you ought to do if you're the CISO and this is your first day of the job, blame the old guy, blame the guy before that who didn't put any taps. And that and then just go up to your boss and say, hey guy, you just hired me. I know I've got problems to fix, but I guess what? The last guy, whoever it is, with due respect, he didn't have any taps. And let's just do that. So that's your first envelope.
Right.
Right. And I did have a call just recently, a person I worked with at a previous company, and they went change over to new companies. And one of the first things he wanted to do on the security side was exactly what Tim mentioned, is wanted to at least get 2 or 3 taps implemented at several locations, and at least get the taps in, because you obviously have to schedule downtime. They have to be installed for the first time. And even though the security tools weren't picked yet, this person knew that the minimal thing you got to do day one is get that access point. So you know what? It's an inexpensive way to get the data points. No different, when you used to get your T1s in, you get your DS3s in, what was always next to it, right? There was a monitoring port, or you put your Y cable in. no one puts in a WAN link without having a monitoring port, and it makes sense. It's simple, it's easy, and we're going to get some people started next week with it, because we're actually giving away a couple taps next week. We're going to do some 100 megabit passive taps with 2 aggregated 1 gig monitoring ports. So you'll actually be able to put a tap into a 100 megabit link and get full line rate traffic to your gigabit ports. Because one thing with Wireshark, most people walk around, it's on a laptop, it's a single port on their laptop. So, for troubleshooting, it's a great way. Why mess around with, do you want your engineers going into your production switches and trying to set up a spam port that could potentially cause a problem when, you need to troubleshoot something, pop a tap in line and start collecting data and start sending it to your laptop so you can do data collection and troubleshoot it. And you can do that, if you're doing more, to the desktop, or troubleshooting VoIP, or whatever application issues you might be having to end users, you can actually go right at that point, collect the data, and do some premise troubleshooting immediately. So we're going to be helping out a couple of folks next week to get jump started on that. And it's essential. We're going to continue to educate people and get them involved in knowing that this should be part of your infrastructure. Another thing we've tried to do is even talk to cable companies and work with our CDDs and say, okay, if you're doing a structured cabling system, you're developing your cabling infrastructure, you have your main distribution frame, right? You have your MDFs, which then get pushed down to your IDFs for your intermediate distribution frame. So even when you're designing your cable infrastructure, on the fiber side, you could take the same approach and say, let's, day one, put in some monitoring ports to your uplinks and your critical connections and to your server farms, places that you're going to need to get access to. And if you're doing a build out, you're doing a data center, the tap piece is something that makes sense, and put it in the budget then, because when you're building out data centers, you have the budget, and these are some of the things that we're trying to readjust the thought process in the industry to say, think about this day one, because a lot of times where we get involved is with the project. When I say a project, someone says, I need to deploy Riverbed, I need to deploy your application performance monitoring, or I need to deploy a IPS or a next-gen firewall. And so we get involved just to install that particular product, which is fine. But I also think we could look at the bigger picture as well.
Yeah, so first, today's show title is 100% network visibility, and I believe that's your marketing message too for the company. But I wonder if it makes sense to tweak that just a little bit, and instead of having just a philosophy or a placeholder for a marketing message, 100% network visibility is the badge of honor, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you go into a network and they have no taps, they don't have 100% network visibility. I am sorry.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean that you couldn't troubleshoot your network. It doesn't mean that you couldn't provide security to the network. You just don't have it. Right. We can still work with that. It should be something that we can say to someone that says, "Well, do you have 100% network visibility?"
Or even I call it a visibility plane. But one point, Chris, I wanted to bring out is you always talk about you have to bring the network down to plug in a tap. Yeah, you bring it down, but it's not like a massive amount of time. If you can't put an extra cable in about 30 or 40 seconds, something's wrong. So we're not talking about taking your network to the knees. We're talking about a short interruption. And a lot of people bring that up to me. They say, "Oh, I got to bring my whole network down." No.
Right.
Come on, this is silly. If your network is not redundant, right? Which means that if you cut one link, it brings the network down to zero. You got a different problem anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
you know
it's
this is a false choice.
That's right.
right.
That's the point I was trying to make. Is that, and
Yeah.
and people do it all the time when they're mucking with span ports because it's line code,
Yeah.
and you mess up one thing, you shut something down.
No, I think it's fair. I think it's being fair. I think at least if Paul Offord were here, and Paul Offord is a network troubleshooting guy,
Right.
and he wrote a really nice article on Love My Tool that actually speak for Spanport, right? And I just want to be sure everyone understand that we're not saying that Spanport has no utility.
Tell you. Yeah.
Right? I mean, there are times when
Absolutely.
you just have to go in and fix the network, and Spanport is all you have. Then Spanport is all you got. That
Right.
we're not saying that you shouldn't use it. We're just saying that with a little bit of planning and a little bit of strategy, you could put yourself in a better place. And the other hand, I just kind of follow up with some of the kind of discussion we had. I mean, sales is all about finding the lowest hanging fruit, right? And so part of that ought to be that whenever you inherit a network, whether it's because you just got promoted, or that your company acquired someone else and now it's your responsibility to manage a network that you haven't managed before. I think that our message to them ought to be that now it's time to put in some taps, because 6 months down the road is your problem.
Right.
But right now you have a window opportunity to at least put in some taps, gain some visibility to your network, because if you don't do it in the first 90 days, you got problems, and you don't want that.
Nope.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's a great point, because it's the starting point, and it's a permanent connection. You always get the traffic, and that can't be taken away.
The other thing that I think is worth talking about, and this was really my experience running my last company, is that part of the educations, in addition to the end users, the network engineers and network managers, part of the educations is really with the two vendors. And oftentimes, especially if it's a startup, a new company, or if it's some, even it happens with established company as well, is that a lot of times they think that, oh, we don't want to talk to the customers about taps because that would just be another thing that we have to sell. That just complicates it. No. Actually, it does not complicate your sales. It actually simplifies it. Just think about all the times when you have a box that you want to bring to the customer. I mean, I have examples of vendors calling us up and say, hey, can you guys come down here because we need taps, or we need something. And I said, well, are you guys who are you? How did you learn about it? So, well, we actually been trying to get a customer to trial a box, and we've been waiting now for 6 weeks. We just can't get on the span ports. So can you guys help us? That's one example. Another example is that they actually have done the trial and they can't roll it out. They got the budget and they can't roll it out because the customers don't have don't have places to put it. So another part of education is really with the two vendors to say, hey, the tap is your friend. Right? And I'm sure, Chris, that's how you and I got to know each other in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that partnership was very natural. Yeah.
Right. We were providing the taps for you.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's and it does make sense, and there's also definitely education with the tool manufacturers who are making the analyzers, making the security devices, making the active inline devices as well. So yeah, you got to get out there, and you're making their life easier because now they can get access to that live data to show how great their tool is. Right.
Yeah.
It's let me show you how great my software is. They want to see it with their data though.
Yeah.
So it's important that the customer.
Next week is Sharkfest, and you're going to be there on Tuesday, which is the first day of the show. And this is not your first rodeo. You've been to watch Sharkfest before, actually almost every year, right? Almost every year from the beginning.
Yeah, I think I missed 1 or 2 years, but yeah absolutely.
And so we want to speak to the attendees. We want to speak to the people who are there to learn about Well, actually, why Sharkfest is a very interesting place, right? Because you have the developers who are kind of into a world of their own. They're there because they work all year long and all year round, and now they have a chance actually to see each other face to face. That's something else. But then you
Right.
have a lot of people there, and they might be there to learn about Wireshark, but a lot of times they're there to learn about network technology. Right. So you in the past, what has been your experience talking to some of the attendees at Shopfest?
Well, one, and it's been it's a great community, and one of the things I like about it is that see a lot of familiar faces. So I've met a lot of folks over the years, developed some great relationships there, and it's really no different than some of the other shows. Now, it is a limited audience, right? Because I think they allow about 300, 400 people. Tim, I think maybe you would know.
Yeah, around that, right.
So the one thing is that there is a there is the similar group coming out there, so you're seeing familiar faces. So with the familiar faces, I found that over the years, there's definitely some people who become big TAP advocates, and some of the folks there have been promoting TAPs after getting together and understanding the value. So that is one thing I've seen is over the years it's helped grow Garland's business. Create some great relationships, but it still comes down to educating people. They're saying, well, what do you do? What's this piece of hardware do? Why do I want it? And another thing is, why Garland? And I got that question at Cisco. Someone said, well, I've seen TAPs before. Why should we look at Garland? And I think that's an important piece. Is you still need a quality TAP. And one of the things that we do at Garland is we make sure that everything's tested. We manufacture, we design, we do everything here in the U.S. We support it, and we bend over backwards for our customers because this is in line, and you need to have quality and guarantee.
I actually have seen you bend over forward with the full customers.
What's that?
No, I'm just kidding. I said you don't just bend over backward. You bend over forward.
That's right.
I mean, we're here for the customer, right? That's how. I mean, we had some great time, really working together, making sure that customers get what they need. And I think that I would also say that oftentimes, I mean, that's my experience with Chris is that we're here to sell taps. But in the end, the customer make their own decision. We can't really control that, and the best we can do is really give them the best support and the best education. And then if for one a lot of times these decisions are political anyway. So if they end up buying someone else's tap, then that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, one thing I want to mention, though, Denny, you brought up the thing about Spanport a minute ago. I concur. Spanports have been around for a long time, and they can be used. But as our industry moves further and further into lawful intercept, more e-discovery, proof of losses, and as opposed to guessing what one lost, Spanports are not accepted in most courts. E-discovery, they just recently decided they'd accept metadata. But as far as when you go into court and you have to swear that I caught everything that went on in the network, you can't do that with a Spanport. So, that's the problem that people are starting to face now is they have to have a viable methodology to capture things so they can prove it if they have to in a court of law. And so Spanports are great, VACLs are great for what they were designed for, but they're not a replacement for TAP.
Well, I don't know how many people out there who's old enough to remember the OJ trial. I try to forget it. But the OJ trial was not about DNA. It was about the chain of custody.
Right.
And so I think that's what Tim is saying is that if your job has anything to do with the law, and you ever get it to the court, they're not going to be concerned about the data. They're going to be concerned about where you get the data. And the first time you say that it came from Spanport, the attorney on the other side is going to be smart enough to tell you that that's the end of the trial.
That's right.
I mean, just that simple. Just that simple. So and you wouldn't be looking very good among your peers, when that happens. So, Chris, should we wrap this up? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's make sure that folks don't stay in the dark here. Go out, get a tap, and if you want to come learn about it, definitely come out and see me next week. I'll be at Sharkfest on Tuesday, and then actually I'm going to be shooting down to Houston for a Palo Alto Networks conference, user group community in Houston.
This year at Sharkfest, the vendors don't get to do presentations, but there's a special event, right? So if they can't find you anywhere, there's one place they can find you where they actually get free drinks, don't they?
Absolutely. Drinks, chance to win free taps, and learn about it. It's going to be Tuesday night, and that's going to be from 6 to 9. So anybody there, I'm sure anybody who goes generally goes to the event. So stop by.
Do you remember what night is that? Which night is that? Is that Tuesday night?
That's Tuesday night.
Tuesday
next
night.
week.
Yeah.
So looking forward to it. Looking forward to see a lot of friends and colleagues that worked with over the years. And Tim, it's unfortunate you're not making it this year because last year was awesome to have you out there and hang out with you. And Denny, are you going to be stopping by?
I actually, there's a conflict. I got to get onto a meditation retreat soon, next week. So
Okay.
There's a conflict, and I'll be contemplating, just not about taps.
Okay. Well, you can meditate a little about taps.
Yeah.
Keep the real view, Denny. Keep the real view.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I'm gonna call it a wrap. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Denny.
You've been very, very busy. As usual. As usual.
the pumper. What's his name? You see him here. You see him there. You see him everywhere. That's Chris.
Well, I hope to see everybody next week at the Sharkfest show.
That's gonna be an awesome
That'd
show.
be great.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.